Desert Race Adventures asks the question, what would happen if a rally game didn't play like a driving game, but played like the Oregon Trail instead? You won't be driving, instead you'll be making choices based on events cropping up across your rally run, and that will contribute to your overarching score, so long as you make it to the end and are still alive and surviving. This game is a really interesting one with a unique theme on a roguelike Oregon Trail style game, and that's what pulled me in because you know me, I love a racing game. You're not physically racing here, but you are making choices that matter. This game, though, has its core mechanic as both a blessing and a curse because each run is unique and different because you'll have different generated co-pilots and pilots, generated environments and cues to have to deal with, but also because it's randomly generated every single time, you're never really being truly measured against everyone else's experience. And so the online leaderboard, which ultimately you're measuring yourself up against, is not entirely within your control, and neither is most of the rally and things that happen to you. And depending on how you feel about that, I think is going to grossly sway whether you enjoy Desert Race Adventures or not. At the beginning of each game, you will be asked to choose a pilot and a co-pilot, and each one comes with a pro and a con. Spot the Ayrton Senna helmet also in the pictures. What you'll have is a pro, which is something like gains 25% less fatigue each day or uses 15% less fuel. But the con might be they recover less health every time they go to rest. Or it might be that they get lost 20% more. And these are kind of pros and cons that you'll want to balance potentially the pilot and co-pilot out or really lean into depending on what your strategy is going to be for your rally run. The next thing you want to consider is the weight of your vehicle and the resources you want to carry with you. You're going to be racing from Brussels to Lomé in different stages where you can at each destination replenish your loadout and either do that, rest, or repair your vehicle. But you might need to repair or do things along the way, and that's where the loadout comes in. You've only got 3 slots, but you've got 6 different things that you can take along for the ride. I personally kept going for the jerry can for fuel, the food for supplies for my pilot and co-pilot, and spare parts, because the faster you go, the more likely your car's to shake to bits, and you're going to need to repair things as you go. The other stuff is helpful for if you come across very specific events because it can negate negative outcomes, and that can be incredibly helpful too. But if you're going to do that, it's a risk versus reward balance, and that's really what this game is all about. But I found that quite often the weight penalty for carrying that meant that I couldn't drive as far each day, which meant more things happened, and inevitably they would overpower the negative reactions that they might negate on the first time through. Once you're then into the game, the key here is that you've got 3 different racing paces that you can choose from: slow, normal, fast. The slower one will replenish your pilot and co-pilot's health if they've had a crash or become ill or got lost or got dehydrated or starved, or heavily fatigued, and then it just saps away at their health. That's quite helpful, but it can also mean that whilst you're travelling slower and you're going to take more days to complete the rally, you're going to also take away less food and fuel. Speed it up to normal and you're going to take away a fair chunk of fuel and food, but also start to fatigue your drivers. And if you're going to go fast, then it's a real heavy penalty for food and fuel and fatigue, but you'll also probably start to trigger more negative events that come along for the ride because your car will potentially start to crash because if you're driving fast and you're fatigued, in theory, that's going to be a bit of a cataclysm for problems. And then that means you'll be using your spare parts to constantly repair things as you go. And so what you're doing is flipping between the 3 different racing paces to try and spin a roulette wheel that you never see around risk versus reward. And the crucial thing here is you never see it. And that for me felt quite hands off because at the end of each day, there would normally be some kind of randomized event. Like, do you want to take a shortcut? And if you do, you might do well and jump forward and be able to travel further than you want. But invariably, you might also get lost, which then saps away food, fuel, and fatigue. So it's a risk versus reward. It could be that you want to slow and pose for a photo opportunity. That will give you more points, but you'll travel less than you expected. Choose not to, and you might be able to travel more than expected. And if that means that you then hit the next destination for a rest point, a repair point, or a replenishment of your resource loadout, it's that risk versus reward of can you get yourself over the line. The problem is that every time you play, these events are entirely random, and so are your co-pilots. And so I felt like I was quite out of control of being able to mitigate a lot of things that came along. And I was just clicking through some options out of pure interest to see what would happen. And I didn't really feel like my skill in judgment of choice, unless I was being really reckless and trying desperate to just get to the end of something without any consequence or thought for it whatsoever, then yeah, you can kill your pilot and co-pilot, and you can blow up the car, and you can run out of fuel and it conk out and it's all game over. But you're going to have to really go some to be quite poor unless you get to the very last part of the journey, in which case it's slightly harder because there's bigger gaps between them and you're really low on resource. And if you've been pushing things, your drivers might be quite fatigued as well. Up until that point, it feels like you're going through the motions. And so I didn't feel particularly connected to this game because I didn't understand the impact of my choices, because it's all hidden behind RNG roguelikeness and nothing's ever the same twice. So it felt like a bit of a pain point and problem for me. I think one of the things, if I was to look at the design of this game and suggest an improvement for the future or a sequel, should it happen, is to generate specific seeds of actions, events, pilots and co-pilots, and then run that as like a weekly event where everyone gets the chance to then submit onto a leaderboard. So it feels like there's some kind of global Oregon Trail rally competition. And I think that would make this game feel so much more connected to the player and make your decisions matter, because the online leaderboard doesn't feel like it should matter because everyone's played a different game. But also, I can't really see the impacts of my choices too. So an interesting curiosity Desert Race Adventures is. I think this is going to be a real niche audience that enjoys and gets this. And even then, you're going to have to wrestle, I think, with some of the design choices that have been made that make you feel a little bit too potentially hands-off. For my liking, anyway. However, if it does tickle your pickle, Desert Race Adventures is out now.